Our topic today, this I have to say, in terms of Shabbos and Yom Tov, this is one of the most FAQ, frequently asked questions. Hello, Shlomo, please take some Makuris, especially printed for you. Yes, bevakasha. So this is one of the most frequently asked questions, because living as we do in the Middle East, it can get pretty hot in the summer, and living as we do in the 21st century, we're very spoiled and pampered in terms of taking showers. Once upon a time, not so long ago, people used to, go to bathhouses and take a shower once a week, if that. Just imagine, right? For us, this sounds very outlandish and strange. So once in left and Lola Krim.
Queen Anne, only in the day she got married.
On the day of your wedding?
Yeah.
Well, if there's one day, then that would be the day, I guess. But still. Well, I guess then that was normal, but who knows? So this is a very interesting and very important question in halacha. Another question, of course, is giving showers or baths to babies. Also an important question. And this question divides into Shabbos on the one hand and Yom Tov on the other hand. Because on Shabbos, there is obviously a question of heating up the water, right? Just heating up the water on Shabbos is, of course, a problem of bishul, right? Of heating up the water. On Yom Tov, there might be a heter. It might be permitted to heat up the water on Yom Tov, because as we know, we paskin like Beis Hillel, and Beis Hillel say mitoich shehutra l'tzorech, just like it's mutter to heat up water for bishul l'tzorech oichel nefesh, shehutra nami shelo l'tzorech, Mishnah in Shabbos Beitzah, and we paskin like Beis Hillel, not like Beis Shammai. At the same time, not so clear that you're allowed to heat up water for the purpose of taking a shower on Yom Tov, because there's another t'nai, another condition, that there's only certain tzrachim, only certain purposes for which you're allowed to do malacha on Yom Tov, oichel nefesh, and things that are shaveh l'chol nefesh. And in the time of the Gemara, it was pretty clear. The Gemara says that, or that's what Tosfos says, we'll see this in a minute, that showering is not shaveh l'chol nefesh. Why not? Because only very spoiled people take frequent showers, right? Most people don't take frequent showers. So it's not shaveh l'chol nefesh, just like mukma, the example of the Gemara Shabbos and Beitzah of what's considered not shaveh l'chol nefesh is incense, right? So you're not allowed to make a fire for the purpose of incense, of having a good fragrance in the room, because it's not shaveh l'chol nefesh. And the same thing, says Tosfos, is true also of taking showers. And then the question is, what about today? So we'll speak about all these questions very soon. But before we reach all of these questions, there's another very basic problem with taking showers on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. And this is irrespective of the problem of heating up the water. And that's the problem of what's known as Gzeras Merchatzos, or Gzeras Balanios, different ways that the poskim speak about this. And this we see in the Gemara. First of all, let's go in order of these pages. So we have at the very beginning, we have a Mishnah, okay? The Mishnah is speaking about Ma'aser she'asu anshe Tveria, the people of Tveria. Okay, they came and they brought a siloin shel tzainen. They brought a container, a pipe full of cold water, ama shel chamin, into a source of hot water, and this was a way of heating up the cold water. Amram chachamim, and they thought it was mutter. Amram chachamim im b'Shabbos kachamin shuchma b'Shabbos, asurin berechitu b'shtia. If it's on Shabbos, then it's like water that was heated up on Shabbos, and therefore it's also b'rechitza and b'shtia. For Yom Tov, if it's on Yom Tov, then kacham and shuchma b'Yom Tov asur b'rechitza umutarin b'shtia. Okay, it's forbidden for rechitza, and it's mutter for shtia. And of course, we paskin like chachamim, who say that the water that was heated up on Yom Tov, the water that was heated up on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, is forbidden for rechitza. It's mutter for shtia. Why is it mutter for shtia? Because mitoich she'etra l'tzorech, but Ranami shalei l'tzorech, and in this case, it's not even shalei l'tzorech. It's l'tzorech echal nefesh, right? Shtia is for drinking, certainly mutter. But the question is, what about for rechitza? So the Gemara discusses what kind of rechitza are we talking about. The Gemara wants to suggest, if you look at the Gemara, right, there's the two dots, Maishas also on Sheitveria, and then the Gemara says, my rechitza, what kind of a rechitza is this? Ilim rechitzas kol gufay. If it's rechitzas kol gufay, right, ela chamin shuchma b'Shabbos uda asurin, al chamin shuchma me'erev Shabbos mutarin. Why does the Mishnah only prohibit water that was heated on Shabbos? What about water that was heated before Shabbos? Let's say you have water that was heated up from Friday, and it's still hot. It's in your dud shemesh or in your dud chashmal. We'll see later there's a big difference between a dud shemesh and a dud chashmal. Aval, let's say you have your water in a dud chashmali, was heated up on Friday, and now you're coming into Shabbos. Even that, says the Gemara, should also be asur, right? Like we learn in a Brisa. Chamin shuchma be'erev Shabbos, lemacha ruchet b'im panav yadav v'raglov. Aval lo kol gufa, you mustn't wash your entire body. It's forbidden, says the Gemara, even water that was heated up from erev Shabbos, it's forbidden to bathe your entire body with this water on Shabbos. And why, by the way, why is it also to bathe your entire body on Shabbos in water that was heated up before Shabbos? There's no problem here of heating up on Shabbos. So the answer is that there's a gzeira. This is midrabanan. It's also midrabanan, and we'll look at the end of this source. So we'll see that there's such a thing as something known as gezeras merchatzois, a gezera of a merchatz. All right, let's just have a look at page 2. This is Tanur Rabbanan. It's 2/3 of the way down. Okay, Tanur Rabbanan. And here we see merchatz, all right, a type of a merchatz, shepkaku nekavav me'erev Shabbos, lematzei Shabbos. You know what, I'm going to skip this Gemara a little bit and get to where we have the underlining, okay? Umisherabu ovre avera, hitchilu le'esar ambatios shel krachen. They started to forbid, they started to prohibit these bathhouses on Shabbos. What are these ovre avera? Dam Rav Shimon ben Pazi, Am Rav Shimon Levi, Mishon bar Kapara, Betchila hayrechet mechamen shuchma be'erev Shabbos. Hitchila balanim, the people running the bathhouses, they started heating the water on Shabbos, and they said it was heated from erev Shabbos, and therefore they forbade, Chazal forbade using bathhouses even if the water was heated up from before Shabbos. So we have a rabbinic prohibition against using a bathhouse, and the question is, to what degree does that extend? So we see in our Gemara over here, right back to page 1, we see in our Gemara that even water that was heated up from before Shabbos, one is forbidden to bathe one's entire body with it on Shabbos, okay? And this is part of this rabbinic prohibition. It's possible that there's another Issa D'Rabbanan even outside the Merchat because of a suspicion that will say that a suspicion that will say that it was heated up on Shabbos, but it's the same type of prohibition. So we see over here that there's really two different problems of bathing on Shabbos. One problem is heating up the water on Shabbos, which is, number one, it's an issur if you do it. Even if other people do it for you, nonetheless, it's also to have hana, it's also to have benefit from the water that was heated up on Shabbos. And even if the water is heated up before Shabbos, there's Gzeira midrabanan. There's Gzeira midrabanan. So what are we talking about in the Mishnah? We can't be talking about bathing your entire body, because then it would be also even if the water was heated before Shabbos. Says the Gemara, we're talking about, I'm sorry, just your feet, that's right. Says the Gemara, Ela panav yadav raglav, your face, your hands, and your feet. But then the Gemara says that's going to be a problem with Yom Tov, because the Mishnah says that even on Yom Tov, lirechitza, for bathing, it's asur. And says the Gemara, if it's only your feet, your hands, and your face, then even on Yom Tov it should be mutter, right? Because we know, says the Gemara, is this like Beis Shammai, that Beis Shammai say you're not allowed to heat water for bathing? Surely we say like Beis Hillel, that you're allowed to heat water for the purpose of bathing. So therefore, says the Gemara reaches a compromise. I'm not going to get into it in too much detail because we won't have time for everything else that we need to do. But the Gemara says we're speaking about something in between. We're speaking about washing your entire body, but not bathing, meaning not going into a pool of water, but rather splashing your entire body with water. And that is mutter b'tzoinen, it's mutter with cold water, and it's also b'chamin. Now, Tosfos, by the way, Tosfos Dibra Maschil, Dibra Maschil Matirin, right? Beis Hillel Matirin. So Tosfos says, why is this asur, right? Rechitza, why is this asur on Yom Tov, right? Omer reads like in the middle of the Tosfos, B'shem rivada rechitza eina ela l'tainug. Rechitza is only for pleasure. V'asura k'moi mugmar, and it's forbidden, just like mugmar, just like incense are forbidden. Mishum de'ein shave l'chol nefesh, because it's not something which is equal for everyone, because this is something for very finicky people, for very spoiled people, and it's not something which is applicable for everyone. That's why it's also on even on Yom Tov. All right, so we have the Gemara, we have Tosfos. The Rambam, by the way, says differently. The Rambam says that it's also midrabanan, similar to Gzeras Merchatzos. So, by the way, it comes out, right, let's just get the picture straight. It comes out that on Yom Tov, okay, if we have water that we're heating up on Yom Tov, according to Tosfos, this could be a Torah prohibition if it's not Shava L'chol Nefesh, because then you don't have mitoich, and then it would be a Torah prohibition. According to the Rambam, it's only a rabbinic prohibition. It's only an Issa D'Rabbanan. All right. Now let's see what do we say about cold water, right? Based on this sugya, it seems that the only problem is hot water. What about taking a cold bath or a cold shower on Shabbos? Is that a problem? Or is a problem only if it's hot? Okay, question mark. So, first of all, it seems very clear from a number of Gemoras that cold water is fine. Me'ikaradin. Which Gemara do I mean? I think it's brought over here on page 3. On page 3, we see the Gemara says, this is talking about tvila. Is it mutter for a person to be tovel, to go to the mikvah on Shabbos and to become pure? And the Mishnah says that there's a problem with being tovel kelim on Shabbos. However, for a person, it's mutter. And the Gemara says why? It's the top of Yudches Amud Aleph, Maseches Beitzah. Rava Amar Mipnei Shenira Ka Metaken Kli. That's talking about Kelim. Yachi Adam Nami. Says the Gemara, Adam Nira Kameka. For a person, it doesn't look bad when you go to the mikveh on Shabbos because it looks like you're just taking a dip. You're just taking a dip in cold water. And taking a dip in cold water is fine. Says the Gemara, that's good for clean water. What about dirty water? Says the Gemara, yes, sometimes we take a dip in dirty water. The Gemara says, well, that's good in the summer. What about in the winter? Says the Gemara, even in the winter, sometimes you're really filthy and you need to take a wash, even in the winter, even though it's freezing. But still, you'll take a cold bath. So we see in this Gemara that it's permitted. There's no problem on Shabbos to take a cold bath or a cold shower. Nonetheless, we find in the Rishonei Ashkenaz, Trumas Hadeshen, the Maharil also mentions this, that there's a minhag. There's a minhag, at least where they were, not to take cold baths or cold showers on Shabbos. The Maharil says, minhag pashat shelo lirchit b'tzoinen b'Shabbos. He's worried about chashash of different isurim, maybe schita, maybe carrying the water in Rosh Hashanah. He's worried about a variety of isurim, and therefore he says there's a minhag not to even take cold baths on Shabbos. And the Trumas Hadeshen also says this. Bismanenu Zahiri, we're careful not to wash on Shabbos, even to cool oneself down, whether in the lake or in the mikveh. All right. That's the basics. Let's see how this plays out lahalacha. Because as we said, well, we've got first Shabbos, and then we've got Yom Tov. So we've got two issues that we have to deal with lahalacha. And as we'll see, Shabbos is more clear, and Yom Tov is really a very big question of how to rule on these issues lahalacha, certainly nowadays. Okay, so let's have a look at Shulchan Aruch is in Shin Chaf Vav. As we'll see, there's a couple of places, 2 or 3 places where the Shulchan Aruch speaks about this. David, by what time do I have to finish? 9:15. Thank you. All right, so Shulchan Aruch says as follows. Okay, are you with me? This is on page 4. Okay, also lirchaitz kol gufay. Said the Shulchan Aruch, as we saw, it's also for a person on Shabbos to wash his entire body. Afilu kol eva ve'eva levad, even if you do each limb individually. Afilu b'mayim she'uchamu me'erev Shabbos. Like we saw, this isn't just a problem of water that was heated on Shabbos. It's a problem even for water that was heated before Shabbos. On Shabbos, it was done by Isser. You're not allowed to heat water on Shabbos. But even if the water was heated before Shabbos, nonetheless, it's forbidden to take a bath in hot water on Shabbos. And like we saw, this is a gzeras merchatzos, right? It's a gzera of a bathhouse, which in the Shulchan Aruch and in the Gemara and so on, seems to apply universally. Obviously, they didn't have baths in their individual homes, which sets out a certain question about how would we rule on this nowadays. We'll speak about that in a moment, but certainly in the Shulchan Aruch, there's no question. It's forbidden, even in water that was heated before Shabbos. Bein bekli, bein bekarka, whether you're doing so in something which is part of the karka, meaning it's built in like a pool that's dug into the earth, or in a kli, or in a large tub. Afilu lishpoich hamayim al gufay, even to take a shower, right? Lishpoich mayim al gufay, to splash yourself with the water, ulishtatef asur. All of this is all forbidden. Okay. Says the Mishnah Brura, right? Also, this is simple. And even if you're not in a merchat, right? The Gemara, like I pointed out before, the Gemara in the beginning doesn't mention merchat, and Rashi says, while it's gzeira, you might come to heat on Shabbos itself. This is all simple. This is asur l'chol hadayos. But says the Shulchan Aruch, aval, however, mutar lichros v'en panav yadav v'raglov, right? Says the Rama oisharei varim, kol shein eruchet kol gufay. Well, the Mishnah Berurah says that Roiv Gufay is also a problem, not just Kol Gufay, even Roiv Gufay would be a problem, even though the Ramah does say Kol Gufay. Mishnah Berurah brings the Magen Avraham that says Roiv Gufay is also a problem, but to wash your face, and to wash your hands, and to wash your feet, or to wash individual parts of your body, that's okay. And that's okay even with hot water, if it was heated up before Shabbos, okay? So that's the basic halacha on Shabbos. You're not allowed to wash your entire body. However, you are allowed to wash individual limbs if you need to, or if you want to, if the water was heated before Shabbos. Now, the Shulchan Aruch carries on. I'm going to skip a bit. On page 5, okay, page 5 we see, this is the other, sure. On page 5 we see, this is Shulchan Aruch Seif Ches, Adam mutar litvo metumasai b'Shabbos. One is allowed to go to the mikveh on Shabbos, it's mutar litvo metumasai b'Shabbos. If you want to get into this in great detail, so the Bir Halacha is very busy with the question of what's right, what's the right conduct in this question of going to the mikveh on Shabbos? And this is a big question, of course. Is it mutter to go to the mikveh on Shabbos? Naturally, the Shulchan Aruch is speaking about cold water. What about going to a hot water mikveh on Shabbos? These are all big questions. Korban Nesanel, the reason why many are noyeg to be mekel on going to a mikveh on Shabbos, even for hot water, is because the Korban Nesanel says that if it's water that wasn't heated up on Shabbos itself, but rather water that was heated up from before, or at the very least water that was heated up b'derech heter, not b'derech isur, then says the Korban Nesanel that for a mikveh, meaning for a mikveh which is a dvar mitzvah, then the whole isur of gzeras merchatzos, the gzera of using hot water on Shabbos, wasn't made. And therefore many are mekel based on the Korban Nesanel. However, many are makbid in going to the mikveh not to use hot water, but at the very least using cold water. And the truth is, yes, what about not mitumasai? So that's another reason to be more mekel. Why more mekel? Because mitumasai, you see the problem here, what's the potential isser of being tovel tumasai? Well, the Gemara says that the reason why it's mutter to be tovel metumasai, and there's no concern that this looks like tikkun mana, like you're fixing yourself up, is because it's normal to have a cold bath. Because now and again you do it, and even in the winter because you're dirty, and therefore it's normal. Now, nowadays, we know it's not normal to have a cold bath on Shabbos because nobody does it. We're all very makbid not to have cold baths on Shabbos, like the Maril says. It's a minig not to, and the Trumas Hadeshen says it's a minig not to, and therefore the Gra says that now it would be a problem to be tovel tumasai on Shabbos, and the Mishnah Berurah, the Bir Halacha brings this. However, what we do today is generally not to be tovel b'tumasai, but just, you know, Tosefes Kedusha or Bal Keri. Bal Keri is not l'tumasai, it's not the full tumah. And therefore, what we do nowadays, or those who go to the mikvah on Shabbos do, is actually a bit better. Meaning, even according to the Gemara, there's room to permit it if it's cold water. But like I mentioned, many are noyek to be tovel even in hot water, because then it doesn't look like you're being metaken mana. There's no tikkun. You're not fixing yourself up. That's a problem. Anyone going into cold water on Shabbos is doing rechita. But like we saw in the Gemara, rechita in cold water is mutter. Just that there's a minig. Okay, the minig doesn't apply to someone going to the mikveh. I'm sorry? For what? For hot water or for cold water? No, again, when we were looking before, this was only about hot water. The whole beginning of Siman Shin Chafov is only hot water, not cold water. If you'll see the mikvahs on Shabbos, some of them have 3 different tubs. One of them is boiling hot for the ones that say Korban Nesanel, mikvah, we're not worried. One of them is freezing cold for the machmirim. And one of them is like a bit warm. And the bit warm is because there's a tshuva of Rav Moshe, and Rav Moshe says, what's called hot? What is hot? So it says hot is something that, that we consider hot. But if it's just a bit warm, then that's not considered hot. And also the Stapler used to say, if it's just, not cold, it's lukewarm, but it's not hot, then you also don't get into the problem of gezeras merchatzos. And therefore often, if you ever venture into a mikvah on Shabbos, you just take a wrong turning and you somehow enter a mikvah on Shabbos, then you'll see that there are often 3 full tubs of water. One piping hot. Many Hasidim are makel on even really hot water on Shabbos in the mikvah. One which is lukewarm for your Litvisher guys, and one's like freezing for your real machmirim. But it does make you feel good to go into the cold one. You feel like you come out and you say, wow, like that was good. I don't know. I don't know if it's because you feel. Because it's not hot. Well, again, the question is, what was the gzera made on? And the gzera was only made on water that is normal to have a bath with, and normal people have a bath with hot water, not with lukewarm water, and therefore the gzera wasn't made. Well, yeah, but once it's cooled down, then it's lukewarm. That's true, but the question isn't as it comes out the tap. The question is as you go into the water. But you're right that it used to be hot, but then we don't care about it. It didn't get into halachic question. The halachic question begins when you take a dip, and then it's only lukewarm. Now, I'll mention the following. Even though we have this rabbinic issue, okay, of water that was heated up before Shabbos, but we find in Rabbi Kiva Eger that he says, you know what, this isn't so bad. What do you mean it's not so bad? He says it's not a full shvus. It's not a full Issa D'Rabbanan of Shabbos. And that's why he says, he explains the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Zayin. This is on page 3. It's easy to miss because it's on page 3, about 3/4 of the way down. Okay, we see the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch, this is Hilchos Muktzah. I'm not going to get into it's not so interesting for our purposes. But Omer Yisrael Goy b'Shabbos Lalos be'Ilon, you can climb up a tree. You can ask a goy to climb up a tree to bring you some water. Lahavim mayim, derech hatzer, to bring the water. Lirchait bei hamitzta'eh, in order to bathe someone who is mitzta'eh, meaning he has some ailment, he's suffering some discomfort. Okay, and said Rabbi Kiva Eger, mashma the mitzta'eh mutar lirchait afilu gufay. You can even bathe your entire body if you're experiencing discomfort, even if it's hot. Says Rabbi Kiva Eger, why? This is more lenient. It's only because of this gzeras hapalanim, this gzera of merchatzos, like we saw in the Gemara, and that's not so severe. That's not so stringent. This is based on the Rif. The Rif is the source just above this, and the Rif, by the way, tells us something very important. The Rif says, well, I'm not going to read it inside because we don't have so much time. But the Rif says that this Gzera was only made on Shabbos and not on Yom Tov. All right. He says, Aval b'Yom Tov, Shari lirchitz kol gufay b'chamin shuchmu me'erev Yom Tov. The lav dava shechayev alon mishum shvus. He said it's not a real shvus. Right? Ela Gzerahu. It's a Gzera. B'chikashvi b'Shabbos aval b'Yom Tov loy. All right. That's the Rif. So, number one, what do we know? We know that on Shabbos, you're not allowed to take a hot shower or a hot bath, but you are allowed to take a cold shower and a cold bath, but there's a minhag not to. However, the minhag not to, I'll point out, if we look at the wording of the Trumas Hadeshen, not so clear. The minhag is, he says, not to go into a mikveh or into a nahal, bein b'nahal, bein b'mikveh. All right. Well, that's the minhag, not to go into a river, or not to go into or not to go into a mikveh. What about taking a shower? Cold showers on Shabbos, problem or not? Poskim are very busy with this, right? Is there a minhag not to take cold showers on Yom Tov? And I saw on Shabbos, Yom Tov we'll get to in a minute. Let's seal Shabbos, all right? And I saw a number of poskim who say that if you're suffering some discomfort, for example, it's boiling hot and you're really sweaty, then it's okay to take a cold shower on Shabbos because there's no clear minhag. There's no clear minhag. So yes, we'd like to avoid it, just like the Trumas Hadeshen and the Ma'aril say, we'd like to avoid it because there's all kinds of concerns for schita, other possible concerns. However, if you're uncomfortable, it's boiling hot, then it's okay. One of these are brought over here. I'll just mention it. Rav Vosner, interestingly enough. This is a Rav Yosef Vosner. But he also mentions his grandfather, Rav Shmuel Vosner, Zechriya Livracha. This is brought in on page 8. Thank you. What problems? Well, drying off with a towel isn't such a big problem. That's okay, unless it's a very small towel that it's going to become real soaking wet. And turning on the hot water, first of all, make sure that your water is that your boiler system, right, is turned off, meaning that turning on the hot water won't be switching anything on. That's first of all. Second of all, you're right. Make sure that you don't turn on the hot water. Because that would be a problem. Yes. Cold water? No, absolutely not. Even hot water, Eva is mutter. And therefore, certainly that's mutter cold water. Well, again, if you're doing kol Eva, then there's no minhag and there's no problem and you're fine. There's no concern. The whole potential minhag is only for kol gufay. Eva, there's no minhag. That's mutter even with hot water. So there's certainly no minhag for Eva. And thank you, Rav Friedman, for pointing out that on page 8, we have Rav Yosef Binyamin Halevi Vosner, called himself Halevi like his grandfather, Shmuel Halevi Vosner. And he says, I'll just go to the end. He says very nice. He says, listen to this. He says, Mikol makom, b'makom she'achom metzaer oto, pashut she'en kan shum tzad isur. If you're disturbed by the heat, he says, there's no problem at all. And then he says, you know what? He says, Ano mishtadlim, we try, lelech k'fi shechunachnu, Mori v'Rebbe Amuva Kadin Iskeni Shlita, she'en midaga hira lechanech lechumrot. We don't educate people for all kinds of stringencies. Right? We don't have a clear tradition on this. And even though there's a trend of chumros, and Rav Vosner wasn't a very particularly makel Rav, but he was a traditional Rav. Shmuel Vosner was a traditional Rav, Hungarian, very traditional Rav. We're machmir on many things, but what we're not machmir on, we're not machmir on. So I just thought that's a nice expression. Now, and by the way, there's Rav Moshe Feinstein. If you look at the top of page 8, right, Rav Moshe, he says minig b'chol hamakomos, but then he says, no, he says for tefillah scary, he says it's mutter, or yesh nagim lehatir. Rav Moshe doesn't like being tovel. He said it's a minig. I saw someone speak about this, and it's a very interesting question. He says, well, the minig is not to take baths even in cold water, or showers even in cold water. But he says, why do people not take a shower in cold water on Shabbos? He says, well, it's because they don't know the halacha. So does that create a minig, right? If people don't do something because they don't know the halacha, does that create a minig? Very interesting. The Dafka the Ma'aril, he says, I've seen women are noyeg not to be tovel on Shabbos. And then he tries to justify the minig of women. But why women noyeg? No. So it's interesting whether that creates a minig or not. And Kan Shabbos. Question, should I speak about Yom Tov? Or should we stop? Avi. Pesach is far away. We could pick this up next week. Yalla, let's pick it up next week. All right, that's Shabbos. Yom Tov. And Yom Tov is actually the big halachic question of what do we do on Yom Tov nowadays. Huge machlekes a poskim. So let's speak about it next week.